Absolutely. Okay, welcome to the Media Growth webinar on the monetization of data. We're so excited that you can come. We have an excellent presenter here. So first I want to introduce Active Conversion. Active Conversion is sponsoring our webinar and they're also empowering it. So Active Conversion is giving B2B media publishers the technology they need to digitally transform the way they connect with their advertisers and their sponsors. Their software gives advertisers unparalleled transparency and lead attribution across domains to dramatically improve ROI and advertising experience. You can book a meeting with them or get more details by adding a message to the chat bar here, and the Active Conversion team will reach out to you. So now I want to introduce our presenter, who we're really excited about having him speak. So his name is Hamid Ben Brahim. Hamid is head of data and AI at Thomas, which serves B2B media buyers and industrial suppliers with business and career information, solutions, and guidance. He is a business leader that transforms industries with AI, advanced technology, and innovations. Before joining Thomas, he was CEO of Natural Numerics and Chief Data Officer and Managing Director of TD Ameritrade. Hamid has degrees from Columbia Business School, Harvard Business School, and the University of New Hampshire. He has a PhD in machine learning. Hamid maintains that while data has always been a tradable commodity, data markets are still very inefficient. And in this webinar, he will address some of the challenges and opportunity in the monetization of data. Welcome, Hamid. I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Kathy, and thank you for the invitation. I'm super excited to speak at this event, and data monetization is a fascinating topic. Let me share my screen and we get going. Okay, so in this talk, I'm going to address a number of aspects of monetizing data. Data has always been a tradable commodity. And one thing that's common about the data markets is they have always been very inefficient as opposed to markets for other types of products. I'm going to talk about aspects of the productization of data, and I will address some marketing aspects and distribution aspects of data. These are not in any particular order. These are just key points about the business of monetizing data that I will address throughout the presentation. If any of you have been to a talk about data, I'm sure you've seen a slide like this. It's kind of corny by now, but it highlights a very important problem or challenge in the data business. Is most companies are drowning in data, and yet they need more data. They're asking for more data, or they complain that they don't have the data they need, and so forth. So imagine the difficulty of trying to sell data to somebody who's drowning in data, and that's at the heart of the challenge of monetizing data. This picture is a picture of the Bloomberg terminal. Bloomberg is probably the most successful company in commercializing data. They started a long time ago providing financial data to investors, but they present this in a Bloomberg terminal that made it easily accessible to traders. And now every trader has a Bloomberg terminal, and Bloomberg made a great fortune commercializing their data. As opposed to most people who are selling data today. I mean, imagine yourself, if this looks like your product, a spreadsheet. I mean, that's what most data products out there look like. Yes, there is gold inside these spreadsheets, but it's very hard to get anyone excited about a product that looks like this compared to something that looks like a Bloomberg terminal. These are examples of businesses that successfully commercialize data. There are many more. I just want to pick on a few here. So Bloomberg, basically they commercialize financial data. Foursquare, they made an amazing transition by providing the location services to, or location data to companies that need location-based services. So if you have an app or an application that requires location, most likely you'll be using data from Foursquare. Foursquare is better than Google Maps. They don't give you just the lat long location, but they also tell you what floor that location is in, like the 5th floor, 6th floor, and so forth. So they have much more accurate data that they provide, and it empowers so many applications out there. You all know about Zillow. They started basically just with data of what's sold and where it's sold and when, and they were able to make it as a great enabler for much more advanced real estate services. Recorded Future is a startup that was sold last year or a couple of years ago for $780 million. It's a great success story of taking social media data, news data that is widely available, and they packaged it to become a great tool for people in the intelligence community or for information security. So these are examples of how companies can be very successful at monetizing their data. Another way to monetize data is to provide all of the adjacent services to the data business, like marketplaces is a good example. I put the shovel and pick there because during the gold rush of the 1800s, many people were looking for gold, but a few people found gold. However, Samuel Brannan, who started making shovels, did very well because everybody needed shovels, whether you find gold or not. And this is an example that's used in many contexts of business. Basically, you have to ask yourself the question, can you do something to enable the use of data? Yes, you can provide your own data, but maybe you have opportunities to provide other people's data and to become an enabler for people who are either looking for insights in data or selling their own data. Examples could be combining your data with other data sources, for example, to give it more context and so forth. So let's go a little deeper into what can you do? What are some of the steps that you can take to monetize your data? And then later I will talk about some of the things we're doing at Thomas that I think could be helpful. The first step is make sure the data is valuable. There are so many factors that go into determining that, but I picked these three factors: legal, actionable, first party. The first one is make sure your data is legal in the sense that you're not infringing on anybody's privacy, or you are not using data that you're not allowed to use because it belongs to some third party and so forth. We're noticing huge shakeup in the industry today because of that aspect. Many companies who are commercializing data collected from the web, for example, they're being shut down because of the new regulations, GDPR, CCPA, that require that people get explicit permission from their visitors to be able to commercialize their data. So we're already noticing many companies either going under or making big shifts. And you probably noticed it when you go on a website nowadays, you get these huge annoying banners about the cookie policy because everybody now is required by law to do that. So that's a huge importance in determining whether you'll be successful in your data business. The second aspect is it has to be actionable. Again, the analogy of drowning in water, you're trying to sell data to somebody who has a lot of data already. So it's very important for the product to have a clear line of sight as to how it can be used in the in the business. The last one is it's first-party data. Basically, it has to be data that only you can have access to. It's data that you produce from your operations or what other means. And the reason it's important is because the marketplace is so confused. There are so many vendors of data, and many of them, they just repackage data they acquired from somewhere else. And customers now, they're more and more insistent on knowing where the data came from and whether your data is first party or not. So that becomes a tremendous differentiator in the marketplace. Call to imagination. The reason there is like so much hype in the data business is because lots of people see the power of data. They all heard success stories, and they know very well that data-driven decision-making is much more powerful than simply relying on your intuition, because with intuition, you have lots of blind spots, and there's so much data, so much happening that you cannot humanly process all of it. So there are lots of opportunities out there that exist in the data that can be processed. So now how do you get your customers to see that and start imagining the possibilities? Now, there is a very delicate balance between selling raw data and selling products or processed data. And these two have to go hand in hand. So our experience with hedge funds, they all insist on seeing raw data because they want the facts, and they have very powerful systems in place. They have lots of expertise on how to analyze data. So they don't want it to be tainted by anybody's interpretation. So they want the raw data. So when we go to them and say, we also have these products, we also have indices, we have trading signal, we have market segmentation and so forth, they say, no, thank you, we want the raw data and we want to do our own interpretation. So we give them the raw data, and then a few weeks later, they come back to us and say, hey, can you tell us again about those products? And what this says is basically, yes, they want the raw data, but they need the applications because it helps them accelerate their process, and also helps them see where the opportunities are, as opposed to looking for a needle in a haystack. However, in marketing the data, you have to play the balance of the two. Pushing one too much and neglecting the other sometimes misses the picture. So for every business, it's different for every context. So it's important to find the right balance between showing the tip of the iceberg and the base of the iceberg at the same time, without confusing your customer. Friction is one of the most important factors in selling your data. So imagine you are a buyer of data, you're looking for data, you will go to a marketplace, for example, and you have hundreds of data sets. So you need to evaluate them. You want to understand what they are. And if the data set is hard to understand, hard to look at, for example, probably is going to drop down to the bottom. So how do you make sure you get to the top of the list? You make it easy for people to understand your data and evaluate it and see the value. Well, there are a number of simple steps. The first one is just have simple agreements in place, as opposed to spending too much time on elaborate legal documents, because you'll be wasting weeks in back and forth with lawyers for no real value, because you can never protect yourself 100% with an agreement. The large firms, they typically are very good about respecting your data, because they don't want to open themselves to litigation, and they themselves insist on all kinds of protections. So having a data agreement that is not doesn't cover 100% of everything is okay with large institutions as long as you cover the basics. With small institutions, you don't really have much protection because it's really hard to prove that they misuse your data. And even if you did, going after small companies is probably too expensive from a litigation point of view. So our experience and the recommendation is that make sure you have agreements that cover the basics, that are standard, that's easy to understand to minimize the process. The other element is frequently asked questions. Everyone who is evaluating the data has pretty much the same questions. Where does the data come from? How often is it updated? What format is it in? And so forth. So save yourself time, save time for your customer, and make sure you have clear FAQ that they can quickly look at to have all of their questions answered. The third one is make your data dictionary and the metadata about your data machine readable, like the location of the files, the file names, all of those things, what they are. And the reason why that's important is if it is machine readable, then the client's data scientist can quickly write a simple program that will ingest all of your data and feed it into their systems so they can evaluate it and see the value right away. As opposed to if it's not machine readable, then they have to spend the time to encode it and so forth. Now, keep in mind, you are competing for the time for these data scientists against other data providers. So if yours takes less time to consume, then you are already bumped up the list. Let me move pictures. Another thing that helps a lot is many times when people evaluate data, instead of reading about it, they may just want to see it. They just want to look at few rows and see what it looks like, because looking at the data can immediately show them what's in there. Now, if you have, if your data is a zipped file that has 200 million rows, that's not easy to open on Microsoft Excel. So for someone to actually look at the data, it's going to take them hours, and for some companies, maybe even days before they can actually see the first row. So save them time, make it easy for them, put a couple hundred rows in an Excel spreadsheet and add it to your data set so that they can quickly see the data and know what it is. The last one is a tiny detail, but it saves a lot of time and lots of headache. Use tab separated values instead of comma separated values in your data. Because if your data has text, most likely there will be commas inside the text, and commas create havoc with data ingestion, because basically every comma adds another column and screws up the whole process. So use tabs, not commas. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about how we are monetizing fundamental investing data at Thomas, which is very exciting opportunity for us. First, few things about Thomas. I will not go too much in detail because this is not the purpose of this talk, but just to give you some context. So Thomas, we have a number of business units. We have thomasnet.com, where manufacturers come to find and evaluate suppliers. We have product data solutions, where mostly design engineers come in to find CAD and BIM models for their products, so they can browse product catalog, get the specs, or procurement managers submit RFIs or request contacts with the supplier. Marketing services, we help our suppliers with their website, with their SEO strategies and so forth. And the industrial data business unit, which is responsible for monetizing and productizing the data. We have a lot of data. We have lots of activities that represent fundamental aspects of the industrial economy. We have over 500,000 suppliers in our database. We have over 1.5 million visitors per month, millions of CAD drawings, We provide marketing services to over 4,000 websites, and Thomas Web Tracks, our analytics engine, is installed over 8,000 websites. Our visitors are from all over the world. We pretty much everyone who is involved in manufacturing or needs industrial production comes to Thomas, because we have the largest database of suppliers across the board. We cover all kinds of categories that are essential to industrial production. And you can see we have so many industries that come to Thomas to find the suppliers and the products and so forth. When you look at the aggregate spending in this space, we cover over $2.4 trillion of activity, which is fantastic. So our first product that we launched was the Thomas Manufacturing Index. So this index is the aggregation of all supplier evaluations on our platform, and we add them all up, and then we create a simple index called the Thomas Manufacturing Index, and we publish it every month, and we plot it against the S&P 500. And basically what this shows is the contrast between industrial production and the market. As you can see, many times the market behaves the same way as industrial production, but sometimes they're off, especially after COVID-19. You can see far to the right, the TMX dropped in December when we started noticing signs of COVID-19. And 2 months later, the market crashed. And now you can see there is a huge gap between the market and industrial production. And many people are thinking of an economic bubble, so maybe or market bubble. Who knows what will happen? But this is an example of how we use data, we package it, and then we put it in a context that makes it a product and makes a call to imagination. Now imagine you're a fundamental investor. Think of the legendary investor, Peter Lynch. He used to walk down the streets of Boston and just looking at the stores, who is doing well. He would see, for example, huge lines in front of Taco Bell or Boston Chicken. Then he would call his broker and place a trade. His fund Magellan did phenomenal because of that. Now, you cannot have many Peter Lynches today walking down every street in America. It's just not scalable. However, because of the data, because of the millions of transactions we see on our platform, we see which industries are doing well and which regions and so forth. So by aggregating them, creating this index, it's like having hundreds of thousands of Peter Lynches scouring the alleys of industrial America. So this is an example of how we can take data, aggregate it, make it into a product, and that calls to imagination that many investors can start looking at to get the pulse of the economy. Another product that we're launching is the Economic Recovery Tracker. Many investors and people in industry are asking the question, when will the economy recover? So again, by looking at our data, we looked at how off is the economy for the normal. And what we mean by that is now today we see a lot of sourcing activity related to COVID-19 versus like a year ago, which didn't really exist. So you can see that there is a shift in the type of activity on our platform. So there's something definitely different. And by tracking that difference over time, we can see when do we get back to normal? When will sourcing for PPE drop? And when will traditional product like CNC machining go back to normal? So that's an example of answering the question. Now, as you can see, and as I'm gonna walk through the rest of the product, there is an evolution. We can start with very simple products, and then you can start adding little by little until it becomes more and more sophisticated data products. Again, here we plot against the VIX, which is the measure of volatility, because investors want to know how nervous are investors about the economy, the fear index. Now, to go a little deeper, again, we take the TMX, we break it down by industry, and present this to show investors what's happening in different sectors of the economy. Now, with a very quick glance, you can see that maybe there is a bubble in technology, maybe there's a bubble in healthcare, in communication services. But when you look at basic materials, for example, the markets and industrial production go hand in hand, and so forth. So this is another example where we go a little deeper in the data and we aggregate it to fit a very specific use case. I'm sure investors can think of many, many other ways to use the data, but what we're doing here is we're not trying to address all of those use cases, but what we're doing is we're trying to pick and choose what products can we create, what use cases can we address, and then call to their imagination, because once they see this, then they come back to us and say, hey, can we do this for that or that? Or can we, what if we combine your data with other data sets? So you can immediately see their wheels of imagination turning. And that's where the value of the data goes up tremendously. And the customers ask more and more for data and become more engaged because it's clear line of sight to many things they want to do. Okay, now one more level of sophistication, which is probably one of the thing that investors want most, is to know when to buy, sell, or hold. So we have a number of clients who ask us, basically, can we send them the signal on a weekly basis? We look at our data, we compare it to market performance, and we run a number of models. And then at the end of every week, we produce a signal, sell, buy, and hold based on what the model is saying. This is definitely a more sophisticated product because it's not something you can just simply get out of raw data right away. However, but what I'm highlighting here is going from raw data to a very sophisticated product is a journey that does not have to start at the most complicated product. You can start with something very simple, as simple visualization, simple aggregation, and then little by little, you'll find yourself adding more functionality until it becomes a much more powerful product and much more valuable data sets. So in summary, as I said, a couple of things that are very, very important is remove the friction to make it easy for people to use your data. This is a no-brainer step. It costs you absolutely nothing to do. So do it because the time that your clients spend on the data is incredibly valuable. And by investing very little in removing that friction, you're saving your clients lots of money, and then you make it easier for them to consume your data. The third one is call to imagination. The ground is fertile for that. They already have a million ideas of how to use data, what they need data for. So they're already prepped, they're already ready to receive your ideas. So spend some time understanding their business and see how you can get them to imagine the possibilities of using your data. And of course, the number one is product is king. Selling raw data is a very, very tough business. So find ways to make your data into a product, because products are much easier to sell. If you have sales force selling spreadsheets, it's going to make their life much harder than if they're selling charts, for example, indices, or even applications, web applications where people can go in and browse data or download lists of prospects or something like that. So productizing the data is very, very important step, and staying in the raw data business alone is going to be increasingly challenging because the marketplace is so confused with the number of data products out there, so, or data set out there. So make sure that productizing your data is a key aspect of your business strategy. this is how to get in touch with me. I'd love to hear from you. Any questions, whatever, that would be great. And open it for questions now.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Amit. You did a great job. So we're really impressed. There's so much, data is such a complex thing. So we're all trying to figure this out. I really appreciate your insights. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat box and we'll get to as many questions as we have time for. Okay, our first question that just came in is, you spoke about the financial industry as the perfect marketplace for your data. What other institutions do you think would also benefit from industrial data?
That's an excellent question. There are so many institutions that benefit from financial data. So from our data, understanding what's happening in the industrial production, like who is looking for what products, could be a perfect example of doing market research. So if you know there is increased demand for a certain product category, and if you are in that business, then you have a very good idea of who to target best, whether you're doing keywords on Google, on your Google ads, or you want to actually get lists of prospects in those industries so you can start calling them. That's a perfect example of doing data-driven prospecting. Other institutions could be all kinds of economic development organizations, states, for example. They contact us all the time because they want to know what's happening in the industry, which companies we want to attract to our states, what incentive do we want to give them. If you are planning to expand your business operations, you want to ask yourself the questions, how do I expand? Which industries do I want to grow in? Then understanding what are the shifts that are happening in the industrial space? Where is demand growing? Where is demand dropping? And that helps you better manage your investments or set your strategy where you want to focus on and so forth.
Great, well, thank you. Okay, another question that came in is, data monetization gets a bad rap because people think you're selling their data. How do you keep the balance between offering a compelling product and not alienate your base?
That's an excellent question. So many times people think that for data to be valuable, you have to sell people's names, email addresses, phone numbers, and so forth. And the value of those is actually great in very limited spaces, but in the vast majority of applications, you don't really need the contact information of the individual. You need to understand what are the big shifts that are happening in the economy, or in any space. By aggregating data, by getting the insights out of the data, you're doing two things. First, you are giving the customer the end goal, and the other thing is you're saving yourself from betraying the trust of your customers. So with some imagination, you can sell data without compromising the privacy of customers. So you can focus on the use cases where it's aggregates data that yields the value, and stay away from the use cases where the actual email address or phone number is the value. Yes, sometimes those have high value, but with some imagination, I'm sure you'll find opportunities in other areas. Now, the people who buy your list, so imagine they want lists of phone numbers or emails. If the list is very large, they will not be able to call every customer, or if they want to send email campaigns, we all know that email campaigns are not always very effective. So my point here is there's limited value in sharing selling private data, but there's a lot of value in aggregating data and make it useful for specific decision-making processes.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you very much. Okay, another question. In your talk, you mentioned that companies are drowning in data, and yet they don't think they have enough. What advice would you have for these companies?
So my advice for these companies is to talk to their subject matter experts. in every company, there are people who know the business very well. The people who are on the phone with the customers, the sales people who are out there talking to prospects. These guys, or the people who are on the floor, on the production floor, these guys, they see what's happening in the business. And when they, when you talk to them, then they can tell you exactly where the data is, what it means, how it can be used in their business. So for example, the people on the call center, they could say, yeah, we have all of these calls with the customers. They, for example, they talk about all of these types of products or all these issues. Can you send me a report on the number of issues we're having about such products ahead of time, for example? So then when people call, then they know exactly what the issue is and they're ready to address it. Or the salespeople, they could say, for example, I want to see data about which products are selling better in which regions and so forth. So again, it helps them target their campaigns. Basically, what I'm saying here is traditionally companies, they have this separation between the business and the data. The people who are on the front lines of the business, they don't talk to the people who manage the data, and the people who manage the data, they don't always understand the business. So by having that conversation between the two, then these guys, these subject matter experts, will help you find the needle in your haystack, in your data.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. What are the most common mistakes, in your opinion, that one makes when trying to monetize data?
So common mistakes is just setting it like bad file formats. So it doesn't look exciting, it's hard to consume, and so forth. The other mistake is just making it hard for customers to understand what the data is and why, how they can use it. The other mistake, of course, is having privacy issues with their data without not necessarily vetting the data to make sure there are no issues there.
Okay, thank you. Okay, you said that monetizing data is very inefficient. What needs to happen for it to be more efficient?
So one of the things that's to make it more efficient is an example is just making machine readable information about your data. So it becomes easier to ingest it into all kinds of marketplace platforms, and also ingest it into systems that can evaluate the data and so forth. So that's more like creating the mechanics so that there will be the marketplaces, the different applications can easily evaluate the data, so it becomes more understandable. The other thing is, what needs to happen is to start creating some kind of product categories or standards so that people will understand data categories. So when you look at normal products or non-data products, they all fit in clear categories. When you go to Amazon, for example, you search for toothpaste, you have like all the toothpaste product categories. But when you search for data, it's really hard to be specific. Okay, what are you searching about data? Some data sets are easy to categorize, like you can say firmographic data, as an example, demographic data. But when you start getting into, like, let's say industrial data, like what is industrial data? So there is a need for creating categories for data, so it becomes easier to understand and commercialize.
Great, great. Well, thank you very much, Hamid. You did a great job, and I think, you know, this is a complicated subject, and all the publishers are trying to figure out how to be able to monetize data and make some money, especially right now with events being, you know, live events are not possible, and virtual events are a tremendous challenge. So thanks very much. I also want to thank Active Conversion for sponsoring this webinar. And I want to mention just real quickly that Media Growth Summit is going to be virtual, of course. It's October 12th to 15, just 2.5 hours a day. And we're excited about our speakers. From Thomas, we have Tony Uploff on managing a crisis. And then from Informa, we have Sue Bohek on data, which is, of course, the subject of this webinar as well. And then we have Steve Kakins on virtual events. We have Matt Morgan on digital revenue. So we have a number of good speakers, and also we have, our platform allows a lot of networking. So we're really excited about it. It's all at mediagrowth.com, mediagrowth.com. So you can go there and find out the entire agenda and more about the conference. So again, thank you so much, Hamid, and
Thank
we
you.
really appreciate it.